Welcome your faces back to Pobby and Alls. Hope we're all doing really well. If you're new around here, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe. Really helps the channel out. Can't thank you enough for the support. And we're here with another review. The Blues get the job done against tight side specialists with us, the Melbourne Demons, last night, 77-76. In what was really a game of, well, probably 4 quarters, wasn't it? The first quarter was as close to perfect football as we've seen our Blue Boys play. They were really intense around the ball. They were really direct with their movement. They were concise. They were brave and they were bold. And they went into that quarter and quarter time 30-0. We were there Googling what's the lowest score ever kicked. It was 1 point by St Kilda. We were thinking, could this be a nil? Obviously getting a bit carried away, enjoying ourselves, really cemented that with a real strong second quarter, really encapsulated by, you saw Melbourne go to their big boy players. Mr. Petraka started to come in here. You saw them really target Mr. Pickett, which I thought Chincotta, as always, never lets us down as old Chincotta. There's his shirt. Always never lets us down. Really intent. And it was a real showcase of Carlton's ground ball this week. They really decided to, it was almost a little bit shallower than midfield, which allowed us to slow them down when they went to slingshot. And we've got something to show you a bit later in the show that's really exciting that you've asked for, which we can do a little bit of comparison. That third quarter, they really did start to get going. Melbourne, the Blues clung on. And then the fourth quarter, we really saw the Blues trying to find that interim of dropping back and soaking up the pressure and trying to get it out. And in that fourth quarter, Melbourne were absolutely exceptional in all facets of the game and really took it to the Blues. So there was a good win there, but there was also a lot of learning, which is kind of perfect. That's what you're looking for, particularly at this stage of the season. You want to have things load tested. 3 very good quarters, 1 iffy one, it has to be said. And that's something that the Blues will go. But I really do want to talk about the things with the numbers, which will be exciting. So let's get into it. These are, as you'll see in the green, the pre-game numbers. And you can see here, both sides had drop-offs at stoppage, which you would expect. What we saw this week was Kennedy came in to that midfield, and the Blues definitely this week decided to have the true matchups. They could see this week that this was a little bit less finicky in the terms of pace, and Ollie Hollands, Blake Acres added that pace as they needed it. That's that kind of methodology where you see that little loopy run that Sam Walsh does, and he looks to exercise that. This was a really good little matchup for the Blues to really cement that learning in. Something they strayed from against Collingwood. They were kind of taken aback at Collingwood's directness. And Carlton this week were really direct from this area. And as you can see, 44 plays 39. They found that happy medium between defence. And I think moving forward, that probably does really show us where we are. Is that going to be Hewitt, or is that just purely Kennedy? It's going to be very interesting because they really did manufacture that pace pretty well, particularly with Kennedy. People forget Kennedy ain't the slowest. He might look slow, but he's a very quick thinker. And the Blues negated that with very quick, trying to take the contact and get the handball away, which we didn't see last week against Collingwood. And it really negated what Melbourne were doing. This is where I am really excited when we get to the bottom stat. But turnover, you can see here, the Blues, 45.8, only 32. Melbourne, we talked about it. They're one of the best sides. They are one of the best sides at defending scores from turnover. But Carlton, even though they had a little bit of an ascendancy from that, Carlton kind of took a knock in that by being a little bit more shallower in the midfield. The midfield were almost too close to the defence on transition at times. But it really did help in the event of any turnover. And what is really strong here is Carlton. Negative 11.2 Melbourne are from defensive half turn generation. And we talked about this a lot. Their slingshot is one of the best in the league. Really underrated. People forget just how good that part of their game is. And pre-game, you were looking at the 5th best side in the league versus the 15th best side. And the Blues here have really pegged them back into them lower avenues by that forward half press. There was a really big onus there on the wings. We saw the switch, Acres and Hollands switching wings was very intuitive because they put Ollie Hollands on Ed Langdon, which made Akers have the more inexperienced Kayla Windsor, so they had to try and target that wing at times because Carlton had set up the traps for intercept down Ollie Holland's wing, so they'd flipped it over. And this worked a treat because they were looking for a lot more switches than they needed to try and get that going because Carlton attacked down Ollie's wing, defended down the right, and had the traps down the left. And this really caused chaos with Melbourne's game and really allowed Carlton to recycle their inside 50s really well, but also slow them down on that defense transition. That's a really key thing. This was really balanced. We talked in the preview about balancing the list off. And having players like Jack Martin allows them to really lead up and keep the smalls a little bit further forward. And that was Owens and Durden, but also allowed the midfield to overlap them, which you saw quite often with Jack Martin's mazy run. Patrick Cripps slid into the inside 50, as did Sam Walsh at times, as did Blake Akers, as did Elijah and players like that who were floating through the midfield, and Matt Kennedy. And it's a bit more organic the way it moves. And that was a really interesting little facet this week and worked really well. Let's look at the old pressure numbers. This is where we look, and you can see both sides probably slightly down from where they usually see themselves, really. As you can see, Carlton massively increasing the pressure numbers, but Melbourne massively slightly up where they were, but the output was totally different. As you can see, the tackles inside 50 were less from Carlton, and this is what we're trying to get through to people. That forward press isn't tackles. It's slowing them down. It's taking them options away. The tackles are more of an act of desperation. You want heads on the ball, and Carlton's pressure around the ball was really good. It stopped the smooth movement. And Melbourne tried to do what Collingwood did, but the pressure was double what it was for Collingwood. So it took away the short options. It took away them avenues. And Carlton looking for space. Look at these numbers here, the tackles, plus 21 tackles for Melbourne. They had to because Carlton were getting their running game going. Like we say, they were trying to take the contact, forcing the sides to make extra tackles. As opposed to handballing away from the trouble, the Blues were trying to take the contact and take 2 or 3 players with them in contact. Cripple was remarkable about this. So was Kennedy, and so was Walsh. And it was a real clever little thing because you do see Oliver and Viney like to gang tackle players, and Carlton really exploited that, particularly through the middle of the park. We come up to the attacking numbers, and as you can see, Marks inside 50, this is where that ground ball game was really strong. And the goals per inside 50, the only increase on this sheet is from Carlton. And that's because it was more intuitive when they got the ball inside 50. There was a lot of running, but also by them taking that contact, just think every contact you take as you run inside 50 deduces a player from rebound in defensive 50. And the Blues did that really well, creating them extra numbers. Curnow and Harry leading to different pockets of space really helped them out. And as you can see, it wasn't a great scoring game, partly because of the weather and partly because of the pressure on the ball. This was a real battle of pressure, which the Blues won in the end. The defensive numbers, the defensive resistance, so important. And you can see here, Carlton having a staggering plus 45.6. Being a bit shallower allowed them to commit more men defensively, but also allow them to get the ball out easy. There was a lot of short kicks outside 50, particularly from Mitch McGovern and particularly from Chincotta, who did it as well, which allows them to recycle possession, but also rebound very quickly. Still strong from Melbourne, but a lot of these were big bombs that were intercepted, as we can see by the intercepts. Carlton a lot higher. That trap down the left-hand side they set where Jacob Whittaker got so free, and that really allowed him, Kemp and McGovern, I feel like Voss, that Whittaker Truss, their skill set for him to deploy himself a little bit more loosely. That's no knock on Young. Young is just a pure defender. But McGovern and Kemp add something else, and that allowed Carlton to chain them into set marks. And although they lost a lot more one-on-one percentage this week, so did Melbourne, who were one of the middle sides. Carlton are one of the best at this. And that's because Carlton didn't have them true one-outs. They were more contested one-outs, which we always talk about. The Blues did incredibly well at this facet of the game, of slowing them down and making them have to kick long for 3 quarters. It was only in the 4th quarter when the legs started to go that we saw a little bit of difference. And let's look at the algorithm we talk about. And remember last week, we said that someone in that half-forward space is going to cause problems. It was Neil Bullen. It wasn't Billings. We looked at Billings. We thought the more natural matchup for Neil Bullen would be sorted. But again, you can see here, 43% over where we expected. Jack Viney, no surprise to me. You always expect this. He's got a real negating role. He's going to get a lot of them contested ball and all that. Christian Petrarca, no surprise. He kicked 5 goals. Tom McDonald and Tom Sparrow, they were under a lot of pressure. Sparrow did really well as well. But look at the Blues here. Ollie Hollands down that left-hand side. An absolute genius move. And McGovern protecting it with the intercept marks. Matty Owens, again, continues his resurgence. Cripps really understated here. Cripps' game. Sam Walsh, a victim of this because we expected it. But Cripps, a real good defensive role, but also a real providing role. This was Cripps not taking the game on, being that. And Alex Chincotta absolutely toweling up a guy that we expected to be top 5 just based on the matchups, which again shows the development of Mr. Chincotta. And as you can see there, there's a host of Carlton players in about 18% as well. Really high output, a real team game. And this is a real big thing that we've got to understand. The team defense, combine that with just a little bit of a shallower. They really did learn from last week. The midfield sat off a little bit and didn't wait until the deeper entries, the better, more effective leads. And the switch of Chari and Harry, almost quarter by quarter on their matchups, really helped. Jake Lever was more dragged out of position by the Blues by being that scattered run. And that really helped. And Stephen May's battle versus Kerno, that was a really entertaining battle because Charlie showed some development by bringing the ball to ground. And I really did enjoy the little idea of Corey Durden on Jake Lever. It didn't quite work, but when it did work, it was that more darty entry and bringing the ball to ground. So that's going to be a really interesting thing as they progress of how they really did. Jake Lever was moved in that third quarter, and Carlton reacts to that by putting someone smaller on him and try and get the ball a bit lower and make him work against his feet, which I thought was a really good negating role. All in all, bit of work to learn, especially in that fourth quarter about trying to see the game out. But that being said, we've done it to many sides as well, and Melbourne are one of the top sides in the league at it. Good 4 points. We go away to Sydney. I'll be back with the 5 things we learned where we'll go a bit more in depth. I'm really happy. Thank you very much for everyone's positivity as well on the live and the lead up to the game. We needed that bit of a shift there. 4 points in the bag. We move. Peace, love, and light.
I see her rolling up, Uber black Cadillac, high heel boots and a sexy body full of tats. Baby's bad.